And also we invited you for another reason, which is that you are in a relatively startup position as far as your own organizations are concerned. And so it seemed interesting to have people who were in different kinds of period of their entrepreneurial life. Uh, Everybody is very, very welcome to this session, and please put questions into the chat, and we'll certainly do our best to bring you in as well. I see that Daisy is just joining us. So Daisy, earlier on, I just took your name in vain and said that you had suggested this session, and so we're very pleased that it has happened. So without further ado, let me ask you a question to begin the session. What did you think when we said to you, would you like to join a session on social entrepreneurship and parenting? What came into your mind at that point? And how would you have begun to think about it? Selina, let me come to you first.
Yeah, I mean, first I thought it was a really kind of unique topic. I don't think I've been on all these conferences we've been going to since the pandemic. I haven't been to any about this. And then I thought, I'm not really sure how much value or advice I can add. Definitely not that much in terms of ideal parenting and entrepreneurship, but definitely kind of, I don't know, share the challenges, I think, around that. So that was my perspective. I thought it would be a really interesting conversation, and I'm really eager to hear from other people, both the panelists and also the participants, on their experiences. So I was excited. I want to hear what people have to say about this.
Exactly. I think that's going to be a really interesting part of this session. I agree with you. And so, Rosemary, what about you? What did you think when I said to you, would you like to become a member of a panel talking about this? Because I know you've given it quite a lot of thought, actually, over the years.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody.
Hi there.
Yes, I was quite nervous. I think, like Celine, I thought, well, I would like to attend a session and hear what others have to say about parenting. Wasn't too sure I'd have so much to share, because it's quite a bit of challenges in the process of parenting in the course of my career. And but I'm also quite excited to be part of a panel, because the more I've spoken to people, I've realized that even after you shared about the session, and I'd asked a few of my friends, and I realized I think we just don't speak as much about it, but we're all struggling sort of like with the same challenges. So quite happy to be part of a panel.
Great. So that's good. Everyone's being very polite at the moment. So that's it's a good start. Daniel, I'm not inviting you to not be polite, but I am inviting you to.
I was just going to be unpolite.
I know. That's why I jumped in first.
Okay. I mean, I think similarly for me, being a newbie entrepreneur, being in the mental health space for literally the last 2.5 years, I was a bit overwhelmed that I'm with Selina and Rosemary. And at the same time, like my child has been a huge part of my journey in the last 2.5 years. So I thought, it feels right in some ways to share my journey. And I'm really curious about you, Chris, because you also have, you've got 3 kids and 6 grandchildren and your perspective, but also people on this panel. I mean, people on the call, because I'm sure there are quite a few parents here as well.
Sure.
Thanks for having me.
No, it's great to have you, Daniel, and thank you. And it's lovely to see Nia there playing around in the background. That makes it very authentic. And it's definite that you have a child, that's for sure.
Yeah, I didn't plant her here. She just refuses to go.
Yes, no, that's great. That's great. And you're right, I do have 3 children. They are very much adult children in their 50s and 40s, and 6 grandchildren. So I'll certainly feed that into the mix as we go along. I suppose the first thing that we have to think about really is, to what extent are we going to involve our children in the causes and the passions that we think about, that we are social entrepreneurs for? So this came up in one of our preparatory meetings, Selena, you and I debated this a little when we were in our prep meeting, for example. And you made a very important point, was that you wanted your boy to have his own childhood, you know, to have and to be able to live his childhood. And I wonder whether you'd care to unpick that a little bit for us.
Yeah, I think when we talked about it, and this is something so he gets a double whammy because I'm married to one of my co-founders. So he gets both parents as social entrepreneurs and working all the time, as all of us on this call probably do, or have done at some point. And I think that for us, it was really important to not, I think you'd live with, you know, I can speak for myself and Ken, who's my husband, that we've talked about this, but you have so much a sense of urgency and stress and anxiety and worry, frankly, about the state of the world or social justice. And we really agreed to try to not raise him in a context in which, you know, he receives that or he feels that. And I think we've tried to make a deliberate point of when we are worried about something like that, trying to just almost shelter him. And a lot of my friends do the opposite. They'll talk to their kids about all these social justice issues, and maybe we're doing it completely wrong and I shouldn't, but for us, it was just really important for him to kind of have the opportunity to understand about social justice, because he asks it anyway. Kids naturally notice, but not to kind of impose kind of our worry and anxiety before he discovers on his own that there is a lot of social injustice, and kind of enable him to have that kind of ability or opportunity to just see the world as this beautiful place and not see it the way we see it. So for us, that was something that we tried to do deliberately, for better or worse, right?
Of course, and I think for better or worse is the right answer, because or the right approach, because obviously what we're not doing is focusing on one particular way of parenting. That's not the point of this session. And so what you and Ken do is just as important as anyone else. I know that you have a particular love of nature also, don't you? And I wondered whether you didn't integrate that into your parenting in some way.
Well, that, I mean, and I think I told you, Chris, I'm like, my child, if he didn't like animals, or he was going to have to, it was like, almost like you have no choice. So since he was born, since for me that my self-care, so to speak, is about wildlife and animals and nature, poor kid, like since he was little, he's been shoved into situations around animals, wildlife his whole life. And he was basically raised with his two canine siblings, which for me are important, for my husband are. And I think that that's been something that has been a real part of our family unit, and how we do counterbalance with the beautiful things that nature is and wildlife are, and as in many times in contrast to the things that we can do as people to each other, right? Which now he notices very much. He's 12, so.
Right, absolutely. Daniel, why don't you come in and give us your views here?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to what Selena shared, I think for me, obviously my child is much younger. So her name is Nia, right, which means purpose. We didn't want to put pressure on her, but it kind of just naturally came. But given my wife and I both work in, you know, the development sector of sorts, I feel there's going to be a natural kind of, you know, moving towards these kind of this worldview, this mindset that Selena's talking about. In addition to that, the other side of it is, for me, it's really important for her to grow up knowing that there's a polarity, right? Mental health is a super big, important, and relevant topic right now. Nia, just give me 1 second. And we don't have, sometimes we, you know, it's a reminder, she's a reminder that maybe we shouldn't take ourselves too seriously, right? And it's important for her to know both sides of it, which is, it's a challenge to the world at the moment, and will be there for the next, you know, few decades. And at the same time, if done well, if, you know, just think about the, you know, amazing entrepreneurs we have in this group itself. we are all working towards a better world with good mental health. So for me, it's important for her to be in that journey, to see that, yes, it's challenging and we can do something about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know that both you and Shrutika, your partner, are both in the field of development in one way or another. That's absolutely right. Yeah. Rosemary, where do you lie on all of this? How have you begun this journey with Edward in your thoughts?
Yes, I think first I had Edward at a point when I was taking on more responsibilities at work. So just getting high into more management, more senior levels at work. And I quickly realized that it was a juggle. I wanted to prove myself at my job, so I was working really long hours, but I had to learn to delegate, that I couldn't do it all. There are some things that I had to let go of and have some trust that others would do well. But I also learned that delegating is creating other different types of work. But yeah, how to juggle all that and juggle parenting as well. And also because I was mostly the main parent for Edward, I co-parent with Edward's father. So Edward's father has him some of the time, sometimes mostly weekends. I have him all through the week. And I've learned to balance, or rather to try and do both sometimes at the same time where possible. So for example, I would combine a conference with a bit of a holiday time for him. If I had to travel out of the country, then I would try and get his visas and everything so we could travel together. I would do my conference and have a bit of a break to attend something fun with him. So I think for me, the biggest challenge was that having a child just at the time when I was getting on more senior work, and that juggling hasn't always been easy. But yeah, it's been a good experience for the most part.
I like the way you said "for the most part." So when you talk about delegation, are you talking about the delegation that happens in your parenting, or are you talking about the delegation that happens at work?
Oh, Chris, I think I learned I have to delegate in all aspects of my life. I think sometimes I do tend to be very should I say difficult to trust that somebody else will do something the way I would do it. But I learned with parenting I can't do it all. So for example, at some point I did have to move back home with my parents, so that then I knew he was taken care of, because trying to manage for a couple of years, I tried with getting somebody to help and living home, and at times I'll travel out of town and having to trust that somebody is taking care of my child. And I'd be on the phone so often, it wasn't helpful for the lady I'd leave my son with. So then I moved back home. So, oh, sorry, I see a question there. Edward is now 13. Edward is now 13. But yeah, so when he was a bit younger, then I actually moved back home when he was about 3 years. And I've lived with my parents till last year when I finally, again, moved out of home. So it was delegation in both ways. My parents to help with my son, and at work, of course, requesting others to take on roles, so I didn't have to work too long hours on the job during the week.
Yeah. So this represents to me this very accurate juggling that you have described, Rosemary, represents to me the sort of classic situation of that we as social entrepreneurs have to do actually in a number of spheres of our work, or our life, and the juggling seems to me to be a very important feature of it. I guess as social entrepreneurs we get good at it, or we don't, and I think that's quite an important feature. I can remember I'm a grandparent now, but I can remember when my children were approximately the age that you're talking about, Edward being. I can remember coming home very late and the kids still being up, and I remember going to read a story to one of them in bed, you know, and we sat down and we started to read. And after a while, I realized that the child wasn't paying much attention to the reading, but they were very present, but they weren't with the reading. And so a little while later, I said, "Well, did you want to say something? You know, is there something you want to say?" And she said, "Daddy, I don't like you traveling all the time. I don't like you going away all the time," is what she said. And so at that time, I was traveling a lot to Start Up Basic Needs, the mental health organization that several of us on this call have been involved with. Uma, for example, here, and also Ertla and others also. And so I felt quite sad about that, and I wasn't quite sure how to handle it to begin with, to be honest. And I wondered whether other people had found this who travel quite a lot. I know that you do, Rosemary, within Kenya particularly, but outside as well. Have you come across this problem, Selena?
It's hitting home right now. I'm sitting in a hotel. So I come across this all the time. And it's this, and I'm looking at the chat, and a lot of parents, you know, they're like, this resonates. And I think it's like you're trying to do your best, and that's all you can do. But at the same time, you have this fire in your belly of like this bigger world, right? And it's a bigger world that your child is growing up in. So it's like this like constant guilt. I mean, it's constant, right? I see like too, I think Sandra is talking about, you know, how to expose your kid, and Lara mentioned starting a new business, and you know, I don't know. I think for me, it's this constant tug, and I'm about to have like a 3-week trip in June, and my son at 12 is always, because even if I'm not, and I'm traveling a lot lately also, Chris, like you said, when your child said that to you, and Nicholas at 12, he says it to me all the time. So I'm away for 2 days right now. It's not that far, but then I'm going to be away far away. And it's like, you get in the hustle, and to protect yourself as a parent, you just work because you feel so guilty. But every time I leave, it's like you leave a part of your heart, because your kid's looking at you and saying, why are you doing this? And then you feel like you have this higher purpose. And I'm like, but really, what's the higher purpose? Like, why am I focusing out here when I have this kid? So you're always torn, and it's this choice, like this constant choice that you're making. And I feel I've fooled myself into telling myself I have no choice, but we do, right? And I think that's where the guilt comes in. And that's where it's like this constant decision making. And I'm actively trying to start saying no to more opportunities, or just not going to, I have FOMO. Like I live at the intersection of like fear of missing out, and you only live once. Like I'm like in that little, you know, in the Venn diagram, and it's terrible, like work-wise, with fun things so I feel like that's a huge pull. I don't know how you guys all feel, but it's constant, and I'm really not good at it. So I'm trying to make choices around my child more now, because it's too many years.
Hey, thank you for sharing that, Selena. Definitely with you in spirit. And if we were with you in person, we'd all give you a hug right now, right? So there's no question about that. I can remember bringing presents home when I went away, you know, and the kids, when they were very, very young, they were fine about it. But after a while, they like looked at it like, what's this thing? So after a while, what I used to do is I used to buy a big bar of Toblerone at the airport. And I said, this is Toblerone from Zaire, you know, where I had been traveling. And this is Toblerone from China. And of course, they knew that it wasn't, but they liked Toblerone. So it kind of made it easier for me, and it certainly made it a lot easier, you know, for them to get something they really wanted. I'm going to bring a couple of other people in, if I may. Kate, hi Kate, and it's lovely to see you. And I'm going to invite you to come in a sec. And we've got several wonderful messages on the chat, which I'm going to invite to come in as well. This is definitely going to be, I know our panel members are keen for us to bring in other voices, so that's absolutely fine. Kate, do pop in first. Hi, lovely to have you with us.
Sure. Yes. Thanks. Thank you so much. And I have to say, I am just so happy that this conversation is happening. I mean, I'm so thrilled and so grateful for the group for putting this together, for being open about it. I think one of the things, and actually I've spoken with Daisy, who I know came up with the idea for this separately previously about parenting and social entrepreneurship, this exact subject. And, one of the things that I think we kept saying to each other sort of over and over again is that there really are just not sort of mentors and role models out there of how to be parents and how to be social entrepreneurs. And even though there's so many of us who are doing it, people are not being very open about it necessarily. And so I just really applaud this group for bringing this up as, something that we want to talk about, something that we all are struggling with and want to share about. So I'm really excited about that. And I've resonated with absolutely every single thing that everybody has been saying. I honestly, travel has been one of the things that I was really interested to hear what this group has to say, because of course, I know so many in this group do a lot of travel, and that kind of tug and guilt on either side. Am I traveling enough for, to do the work well? And am I also not traveling so much that I'm taken away from my family? And one of the things that I've really been thinking about that I would just also love to hear from the group is if there are ways as social entrepreneurs that we can make it that we can make kids more welcome in the spaces where we work, that we can make parents more welcome to bring their kids along, for travel. For instance, I brought my 18-month-old, he's not 18 months now, he's 7, but he was 18 months at the time when we went. I brought him along on a trip to India, at one point. And I had it all set up that I was going to have, babysitting, and he was not going to be coming to any of the meetings. And then that just, completely fell apart, right? Everything went wrong. And so I wound up, I carted him around to all the meetings, and actually everybody was very happy with that. They were very much like, wow, this is great. I love having a baby at this meeting. I love having an 18-month-old, even though he was distracting things. Maybe they were just being kind. But I'm just wondering, like, if there are ways where we can, as social entrepreneurs who recognize this, also parents recognize this push and pull, if we can, be more inviting to parents, be real about, hey, you're traveling, feel free to bring your kids along, or hey, I have great recommendations for babysitters, or, are there concrete steps, I guess, that we should be taking to bring that out for others?
Absolutely. I think that's a very interesting proposition. Absolutely. I know that Rosemary makes a point of taking Edward to quite a lot of the places she goes to, don't you, Rosemary?
Yes, I do. And similarly to what Kate said, people tend to be very welcoming. I remember my first conference I attended in South Africa, and same thing. I thought I had everything all arranged. In Cape Town, the second Africa Epilepsy Congress, and I had a session, and my babysitting plans fell apart. But they were okay. I mean, he was not so noisy during my panel, but yeah, people were helpful and tried to keep him busy, giving him paper to scribble on. He was 4 at the time. But I did attend a conference in Rwanda after that had a crash, and I thought that was so good. They actually thought about parents traveling with their children, and they had a little section there for children. There aren't so many children at the conference, but they were cared for. But yes, I think it's something that employers and even organizations when we're welcoming people we could think about. Thank you, Chris.
No, it's great.
If I could add, so I started Because You My Business in the pandemic, right? So we did a lot of online. I mean, we have pretty much done mostly online sessions. And in the beginning, Nia used to come in and I would say, no, please stay out because I didn't want her in. But, like when she's here, it, in a way, it gives, we used to have small groups, intimate, very deep, very, vulnerable. And having someone like her on the call was a beautiful resource for people to kind of get an anchor, right? So for me, she's an anchor my entire life. And I found that on the groups, it's not like I put her in here, on purpose, but there would be people who would break where they were having a really difficult moment. Somehow, like serendipitously, Nia would walk into the room, and it would just, it not just make it lighter, but it suddenly gives us a kind of a reminder of, there are so many things in this world worth fighting for, right? Especially our children. So I found that in my work, like the way to involve kids, the online space, if you're okay with it, to be helpful.
That's great. Thank you, Daniel. Sondra, are you still with us? You made a very interesting point on the chat a bit. Are you with us? If you could.
I am here, Chris. Thank you.
That's great. Would you like to just elaborate your point a little bit that you made on your chat? That would be great. Turn on your video if you can, if you've got capacity.
As a single parent of two, I'm scrambling this morning. I am not camera ready. So if you don't mind, I'm going to leave it off.
That's fine. That's fine. That's not a problem at all.
you.
Most people think I'm not camera ready, and look at me. You go for it as you are.
Yeah, I think this is such an important conversation. And I love Kate's last point, because we tend to, I think, compartmentalize ourselves so much, and we have to be this, professional and expert in our work. And then we have this whole other part of ourselves. And I think that bringing children into our work and really making an effort through organized childcare, through making an announcement when you send out a virtual meeting that, come as you are, as you said, Chris, something like that, I think would help to integrate ourselves in a way that just fosters more acceptance or realness. I don't know how else to say it, but there's this commonality we all have, right? Of that experience of parenthood, and that can really beautifully be interwoven in our work, especially when we're talking about work in the social justice sector. So I think I think it's all a challenge, right? For me, travel has just simply not been an option. It's only starting to become an option right now. So that has consequences, right, in my career path and what I can do and what I can't do.
Do you travel within Liberia?
I don't. I can't. I that has not been an option yet.
Not an option either, no.
Right. So.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all a challenge, and the guilt is ever present, and the questions around, do I work those extra hours? We're also passionate about what we do. It's we're not clocking in a 9 to 5, right? We're all working, and it often doesn't feel like work because it's our passion, and balancing that with the fact that our children are only so little for so short of time is just the ever-present struggle that I know we all feel. So yeah, thank you for giving me an opportunity to chime in, Chris.
No, it's lovely to have your voice on the call. Thank you so much. And I'd like now, if possible, just to go to Lara Pimentel. Are you there, Lara?
Good morning. I'm in New York, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Greetings to you.
I am also not camera ready.
That's
Sorry,
fine.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can definitely hear you. Yeah, yeah. Your voice is camera ready. That's fine.
Thank you. Thank you for calling on me. I was just writing another note in the chat actually, because so much of what everyone is saying is exactly my experience. And you know, what I was just writing in the chat is the time juggle that for me, it's the travel. I just gave it up when I left my full-time position. Once I had my second child, I decided her existence and everything around my children was more important. That's where I wanted to spend my time. But I couldn't stay away from work for very long. So, you know, I started up with Black Fox Philanthropy and consulting and working with lovely clients to drive impact. And you know, now I'm finding that I've got more flexibility in the work that I do. However, the time juggle of, but I want to spend the time with my children and be there for baseball practices and games and, you know, all of the things that I want to be there for. Yet I have work to do and I have, you know, things to get done. That it's quite difficult, even with some childcare help. It's not like I'm doing it all on my own. So I wonder, you know, I've heard different theories of life as a pendulum. You know, don't think about it as a balance, think about it more as a pendulum, that sometimes the pendulum is going to swing more towards personal time, and you're going to have to spend a lot of personal time, and sometimes it's going to swing more towards work, and you just have to kind of be okay with that. But on a day-to-day basis, you know, I guess I'm curious, how do people deal with that on a day-to-day basis when you've got a lot going on? You know, you've got your child, you're like, on a normal day for me, there's work and there's a practice and there's dinner and there's, you know, picking up the house, and there's all of those things that you have to do as a human and as a parent and as a worker. So
Absolutely.
That's where I would love to hear more about people's thoughts.
That's great. Thank you very much, Lara. I want to just go back to a slightly different part of the conversation. Jen, would you like to come in and just talk about this juggle between social justice cause and so on? Just pop in, because you made a point earlier on in our discussion. I'd like to bring you in. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I was thrilled to see this topic as one of the session topics. And I think it's, as we can see by everyone's chat and discussion, it's such an important thing that is often overlooked, and hopefully moving forward, more organizations will take the time to discuss this and how we can embrace our whole selves and not compartmentalize our parenting life and our work life, our professional lives. What Selena said to open up the session really resonated with me. The challenge of raising your children in an imperfect world, a world with a lot of challenges. There's so much bad news, so many terrible things in the world. How do you raise small humans to be good people and realize what's happening in the world, but also protect them and protect their childhood? My children are still quite young, 5.5 and 2.5. But my oldest is a little older and asking more questions. So what Selena was saying about how to not pass on that worry, anxiety about the world, the issues in the world, to protect your children from that, but also, like Daniel said, wanting to raise them to know that they can make a difference in the world, that they can be a positive force for change, for good. I think it especially resonates to all of us working in the social impact sector, because clearly we're doing this work to make a difference, to make an impact. So balancing that is a challenge, and it's heartening to hear other people talk about how they approach that and how that is a struggle, that is a challenge. For me, I think right now, when I get bogged down with thinking about the challenges in the world, the problems in the world, how can we ever make a difference? I try to counter that by remembering that to remember the hope I have in the next generation and my children's generation, to already see how wonderful they are, and they care for their friends, or they care for animals, or they want to, you know, pick up trash that they see. Just balance, seeing that as a balance, to not get too bogged down in the bad news of the world. So that's how I'm approaching it, and happy to be in community with everybody here today to talk about how we can do these things as working parents.
Thank you, Jen, very much indeed. And I think that's a great way of putting it. In community is a lovely way of putting it, in fact. And thank you, Matty, for your comment. I've just seen that, and I'll come back to it. I just wanted to share one thing as a granddad. As a social entrepreneur, I've been a serial social entrepreneur. So I've started a number of organizations in my time. Started in 1978, and started my last one, the Elders Council for Social Entrepreneurs, just a couple of years ago. Anyway, my eldest grandson, he's 21, at university now. I overheard him talking quite recently, and he said, "Well, my granddad," he said, and so my granddad, and then he gave a whole explanation of basic needs, which Rosemary works for, and is executive director of, and Ertler at that time worked for as well. And he gave a very accurate explanation of it, and I can't remember at all having given him that explanation myself. So somehow these things percolate within families also. And I certainly don't remember telling him anything about what I was doing. But he knew what I was doing, and what of course made my heart beat faster was the fact that he was proud of me. And so there is kind of light at the end of this tunnel, in a way, if it's a tunnel. On the one hand, we are bringing up our children to the best of our ability. On the other hand, the children in the end may well appreciate what it is that we were passionate about and what we have done. And so obviously, most of our comments have been about what's in between those two things, between the recognition by an older child of what we have done, and when they are smaller and need our support and help. And I'd like to bring in, I'm going to say to the panel, I'm going to be bringing you back in a minute just for you to comment and reflect on some of what you've heard. But I wanted just to thank you, first of all, to just come to you, Matty, you were sharing with us. Hi, Matty, lovely to have you with us. And you were sharing with us that you are a 4-month-old mum, which is brilliant. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Would you like just to come in and make a remark?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm a 4-month new mom, first-time mom of a 4-month-old, and something that I've noticed, and I'm very grateful and lucky to live close to family and have help. But you always hear the saying, "It takes a village, it takes a village," and that's certainly true. But I think it doesn't, because you have the village, it doesn't take away from the time of managing that village. And that's something that I think is overlooked it's almost like an invisible task, right? That caregivers have, where in my absence, I have to make sure that she has childcare set up, that her bottles are made, that her nap time schedule is still going, that the cameras, and as a first time mom, of course, I'm thinking about the million different things that have to happen in her schedule. But I think that that's something that's often overlooked for caregivers, is the managing of that village, right? And yes, you're lucky to have that help, but it still takes up time. And how to balance that with also the demands of work and friendships and family time. So it is something that I'm learning now is also part of the to-do list.
Yeah, thank you, Matty, very much for that. And we are all with you on this journey that you are beginning, which is wonderful. Ertler, did you want to come in and just make a comment? You'd be very welcome to if you'd like to.
Oh, thank you, everyone. It's been such an interesting conversation, and it's made me reflect on things in my own situation that I don't think I have before. One being when I guess I first became a mother, I was working for basic needs in China. And it was actually a really welcoming space kind of to incorporate my children in meetings, going into the community. And I guess kind of rural communities, that maybe is often the case, because it's, if you're doing farming, or, the children usually they're kind of brought along. And that was very much the attitude. It was a beautiful thing in terms of our partner. My eldest son, his Chinese name is named after the county we were working in, so there are all these, beautiful connections. But after moving to London, I think I found it more difficult. It was more compartmental, what is the word? It was more kind of in compartments, and maybe COVID helped a little bit, but still, managing childcare. And I felt like I had to kind of step down a bit my work, initially after having my second son, because it just didn't seem feasible with childcare and everything else. So maybe, thinking that there's definitely countries probably doing certain things better that we can learn from. And but just overall, very interesting conversation that we're having today, and much needed. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed, Ursula. And it's clear from the reaction of all of the interlocutors so far, whether on the chat or giving voice, that we all feel that this is an area, a subject which is worth further discussion and worthy of discussion, and something which is often underrated and misunderstood, and so I definitely feel we should continue to have this conversation and continue to develop it, either within one of the collaborations that we can develop at Catalyst or elsewhere. And so by all means, keep in touch on this subject, and we'll make sure that we continue to give space to this. I think that would be very important. It'd be great. I was going to invite our panel members to come in. I just wanted to check. Hannah Morillo in Philippines. Hi, Hannah. Can you hear me? I know it must be late for you, or fairly late.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Hi. Good evening.
Hi
Good
there.
evening from Philippines. Hi.
Hello, Hannah. Very nice to be with you. Now, I know that you've given some thought to this whole question of child raising and work and so on and so forth. Would you like to share anything with us today?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just very, it's so nourishing to be part of this conversation, to even just, voice out what we're all going through, what you're going through, and then me totally in resonance with most of the sentiments here in the group. It feels less alone. I feel more empowered actually to be in solidarity with the messiness of parenting, and also the glorious feeling that comes after or with it. So we also do like parenting workshops across the Philippines, and what I'm learning is that we're all learning from each other. We're never experts. Even I feel like my teacher actually is my daughter. I resonate with the solo parent. Sorry, I forget your name, but I'm also solo parenting, and I feel like we're such a great team together. She's also with me. She knows what I do, and in terms of like how she defines, so she doesn't tell people I'm a psychologist or I'm this and that. She tells people that I help people. That's my job. So I love that, and that's what I always come back to when things are rough, or when things are a bit overwhelming, or I need to take care of myself also. Parenting actually is my counterbalance to remind myself that I need to also look after myself, because it's not just work I have to do. I also have to show up in the best way I could for myself, for my daughter. And so it just puts things into perspective. Yeah, and I'm just very happy to be here and be in all your company. Yeah.
Well, Hannah, I don't know about others, but I feel very touched that you feel that support by this modest effort that we've all made.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for this. Thank you.
That's very touching indeed, and thank you very much for sharing. I wanted to bring the panel in, as I said. Caitlin Kirk, did you have any comments you'd like to make, just as an observation, just listening to the conversation so far, as you have been doing very patiently?
Just thank you to everyone sharing your stories. I myself am not a parent, but I've just loved hearing this conversation and having friends who are parents, and that juggling act, and just working with so many social entrepreneurs. It just blows my mind really that you're doing this incredible work and you're putting yourself out there and you're also caring for someone else. And I'm just hoping that this discussion has been helpful for everyone, and that we'll continue sharing these things, because it is so important that people are talking about these vital topics.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Now, what are you thinking as panel members? What are you thinking as you hear this, conversation? What are your responses? Let me ask you to come in one at a time. Rosemary, would you like to start?
Yes, I think, thank you so much for the many encouraging comments. And it's really good to know we're all sharing the same challenges, different parts of the world, different contexts, but it's the same thing, juggling time, finding enough time to do what's really important to us. I mean, taking care of our families, but also making our contribution to the world. So it is, yeah, I think I feel really encouraged that we're all sharing the same challenges, and all to have more sessions where we can talk about how we make it work. I just wanted briefly to comment that sometimes it really can be tricky. Like I've seen instances where I've missed a bit things that I should have caught with Edward. Like there was a time he was really struggling with his own mental health. We're a mental health organization. I'm thinking mental health all the time. And I missed it a bit with him, and he was struggling, but I liked it that my work gives me the language to also ask, when I did catch it, then to ask the right questions and to provide the right kinds of support. So it can be a challenge, but it's also helpful that the fields we're in help us even in our parenting. So thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for being so transparent about that, or so honest about it. It is very helpful to understand that, and very much appreciated. Daniel, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I'm loving all the perspectives. It's just coming together as a nice mountain of insights and perspectives. I love the balance question, the whole conversation that we're talking about. And in addition, I think something that I'm facing, and I know a lot of people also face, is the tension between doing this work and also providing the financial resources to let our children have an incredible life. Right? I think that's something we perhaps haven't talked about, but that's again part of that balance of what we want to do and what we have ambition for ourselves and our kids. There was a lot of talk around travel and presence and so on. And for me, in my short time of parenting for 4 years, I've realized that, like you said, Chris, the presence, the stuff that kids soak up, we will never imagine, right? So I've just reconciled to the fact that quality over quantity is the only thing I can do. So even if I'm with my child for 2 hours in a day, she is the center of my world. I don't care about anything else at that time. And I think that's the only way I can do this kind of work. And finally, I think most of our conversation has been around our kids and them and what we need about, like the challenges. And I loved Rosemary's point around, spotting the mental health of our kids. And at the same time, this work and juggling all this stuff has a big impact on our mental health, right? And I think especially with someone, the reason I started my organization was because I've been dealing with a mental health condition for a long time. So I've got to be even more conscious of it. And I think all of us, I think, just however we can be conscious of our own mental health is really important. So I just want to put that in there because I don't think we touched upon it very deliberately.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Daniel. Again, wonderful, vulnerable comments. And and very helpful, I think, therefore, for all of us to hear and appreciate very much. Selena.
I mean, I guess what I feel like, I mean, how can I feel like it's like, how can I mess him up as little as possible, right? Because kids come into the world with this, like, they're just, you know, this fresh perspective. And you're like, how do you do as little damage as possible? And it like enable them to grow up with joy, right? And with hope and with wonder and with all these incredible things. And again, like we've all been talking about, and I brought this up in the beginning, that's always this like push-pull on raising them, hopefully, like Chris, like your grandchild, right, who's totally aware. Elaine mentioned one of her grandchildren. And it's funny because I'm like, Nicholas, what do you want to be? You know, like we do this the first day of school every year. We do a little video like, how old are you? What do you want to be when you grow up? And he's gone from like fashion designer, and now he wants to be a gamer or write anime, right? And I'm like, well, that's totally aligned with the work both his parents do. So we've obviously done a really good job, right? But then on the other hand, you know, he's really worried with, you know, he understands that everybody deserves the same, and you know, the same opportunities. And so if he ever sees anybody, right now we're in New York, so in the subway or anywhere, he's like, you know, and he wants to, so somehow those things both exist, like that, like child, you know, the innocence, the aspiration, all these, it can exist both, I think. And that's where, and like you said, Daniel, also, it can exist. You can, I think, at what point do we say, I can work really hard and also be a parent that raises a child that, you know, that I hope makes this world better. So it's just finding a place where I feel okay with my decisions, right, and the choices I'm making, and that tends to fluctuate. So I feel like all this is really difficult, and at the end of the day, it's your legacy, right? Your child is your legacy more than your work in so many ways. So anyway, I feel like I'm still learning, and I just want to do the best I can for him to live a life of joy, but also have that agency and compassion, and whatever he decides to do in whatever stage of his life, that he does that with love and passion. So I don't know, but I'm still figuring it out every day, I feel like.
Well, thank you. My son, who's now he's actually turning 50 this month. When he was 14, he came into the kitchen and said, "Dad, I want a word with you." And I thought, oh my God, what's this about, you know? And he said, "I want to talk to you in the front room." That was like the sitting room, you know? So, which kind of, in English society, kind of heralds all sorts of difficult conversations, you know? And maybe he wanted to run away to the circus, or, you know, fall in love or whatever. And so he said to me, "Dad, I wanted to tell you that I don't want to work for charity." And I was so relieved, because I just simply said, "Oh, thank God, then what do you want to do?" And he said, "I want to be a businessman." I said, "Even better, now you can look after me." And guess what? He's turning 50, and he runs through a franchise. He runs, you know, a major company right the way through the south of the country here in England, Timberland. So he's running. So when you go into a Timberland shop here in the UK, you're actually going into the shop he runs, he franchises, right across the UK. So thank goodness I let him go, right? He kind of went on his own way. Now we're getting to the end of our session here, and let's make an agreement between all of us that we're going to continue this conversation. I think it's a very important conversation. I'll have a chat with Selena and Daniel, Rosemary, and others who are on the leadership of our mental health collaboration, and we'll put something together so that we can continue to discuss this. If you are interested in taking this forward, please let Mishri know, who's on our call. She's part of, as most of you know, she's one of the wonderful members of staff from Catalyst 2030. I'm going to put my email address in the chat straight away, because I would love to know if you'd like to see this conversation continue. Please take it down. There's Mishri, she's put her own one in as well. Keep us both informed, that would be the best thing, I think. And we will make a covenant, an agreement to be in touch with you if you request it on this particular issue, and that would be absolutely marvelous. I wanted to thank our panel members very much. Daniel, thank you very much for coming along, and Nia. Selena, thank you, and Nicholas, of course, somewhere there in the background, in your mind, in your heart. And thank you, Rosemary, the same, Edward. Absolutely wonderful to have his education as you talk about your parenting. It's become obvious that that we have to, in Selena's famous words, we have to hold more than one thing at a time together here. And on the one hand, we are, we are sharing and being hopeful for our own children. And on the other, we are having to balance that with the passion that we feel for the work that we do. And it's never going to be perfect. It's often going to be messy. And messy is good in this context. I think that's important. So Mishri, we've had a very successful meeting, and it would be nice for you and I to make sure that we facilitate more conversation in this going forward. So we need to make sure that we've got everyone's names and addresses one way or the other, so we can be in touch with them. Daniel has suggested that if you wanted to hang out a little bit after this call finishes officially, you're welcome to. I don't know whether that's possible. Mishri, is that possible, or do you need the link for someone else?
No, you can use this link, but I will need to leave for the headline session.
No problem. So if people wanted to hang out for a little while, I have a client. I'm a mentor professionally, and I have a client coming up in 10, 15 minutes, so I will be leaving soon. Feel free if that would be good. And you've got a recording, Mishri, of the session, is that right?
Yes.
So there we are, Daniel. And it would be also very helpful to have the meeting chat information,
Yes.
Mishri, if you don't mind making sure I have that, because we had some really lovely comments and coming across, so that'd be great. So wish